library.
I think we're live. Just keep an eye on participants coming in. Maybe give a wee minute for people to drop in. Thanks everyone for joining us. Great.
Hello,
I'll just get started. Although I keep seeing the number going up, so I'll maybe wait a wee minute.
Well, I'm slightly relieved that there's actually more than me and you, because that was my big fear. Nobody would turn up. So everybody that's here, thank you, and say hi in the chats and just say hello to us so we can say hello to you back.
Oh, I can see the chat as well. Great. Now I think everyone's settled in, hopefully with a cup of tea or coffee, which is the beauty of stay-at-home festivals. So yeah, we'll get started. I'm Lyndsey Croal. I'm chairing this event, and I'm so excited to be at the Stay-at-Home Literary Festival, and a big shout out to Carolyn and all the fantastic people who have been behind the organisation this year. And I'm especially excited to be here talking about three of my big passions: books, writing, and climate change action. So today I'm joined by Hannah Gold, who is here, and the best-selling author of fantastic debut middle grade book, The Last Bear.
It's all right.
I've got my copy here as well. Of course, it's beautifully illustrated by Levi Pinfold, which makes it extra special as well. I absolutely loved this book. It was such a lovely, heartwarming, empowering tale, aptly described by Michael Marpargo as unforgettable. You can see that must be really cool. We'll maybe touch on that later. So The Last Bear was published in February by HarperCollins in the UK and the US. It was the Booksellers Children's Book of the Month in February, and was picked as the Saturday and Sunday Times Book of the Week, becoming an instant debut hardback bestseller in the first half of that week. So yeah, that's quite a start to publication, Hannah. So
makes it sound.
How has that felt?
Yeah, it's been amazing. And hello to everybody that's joining us. Yeah, to have that kind of it's just a total dream, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. Whether's here like aspiring writers or listening later on down the line, it's that feeling like when you publish or you write the book of your heart, and it's something you're really passionate about, and then it gets received in a similar vein. You couldn't really ask for much more. So it's been a total joy, and all those little highlights. It's just been amazing. So much joy, Lyndsey. So much joy.
Good. And yeah, I'm not at all surprised it's received the reception it has. It's such a pertinent and poignant book for right now as well. It's got that sort of perfect touch of escapism throughout. Just a really lovely read. But yeah, for the benefit of those who may not have yet picked up the book, could you tell us a little bit about The Last Bear and April and Bear's story?
Of course. So The Last Bear is the story of, here we go, 11-year-old April, and she travels to this remote Arctic island with her father, who's a scientist, and he's going there to sort of do some sort of very important scientific work of measuring the weather, and it's a real-life island in real life called Bear Island, but her dad tells her that there's no bears left on Bear Island, so April's a little bit disappointed. But then one night she looks out the window, and what do we think she sees? Yep, she spots a polar bear, and he's lonely, he's really hungry, and he's a long way from home. And so, determined to save him, April begins the most important journey of her life. So on the surface, it's very much a story of friendship, love, even between a child and a wild animal. I really love that animal relationship. But if you scratch a little bit deeper, then there is this kind of rallying call to save the planet as well, because you can't really write a book about polar bears without writing about the ice caps, sadly.
Yeah, I think I saw one description describe it as a battle cry for the planet, which exactly kind of captures that. I definitely feel I also need to mention the illustrations again, which became such a part of the storytelling. And there might be writers here, and I wondered if you wanted to talk about what it was like working with an illustrator on a book like this.
Yeah, so the illustrations are by someone called Levi Pinfold, and he won like the Oscar of illustration prizes called the Kate Greenaway Prize for his book Black Dog. And he also illustrated the 20th anniversary editions of Harry Potter. So he's a really huge name, and it was quite, obviously when you write a children's book, there's no guarantee it's going to get illustrated at all, because when you're writing in my genre, middle grade, sometimes they've got illustrations, sometimes they've just got chapter heading illustrations. So I was really fortunate that they wanted to get an illustrator, and they brought somebody on board of that much caliber. And the reason that they did, just to be really transparent, is that when you're a debut author and you're an unknown entity, they bring an illustrator with a name on board to give you traction in the market. So for booksellers and librarians and teachers, a lot of them would know Levi already and go, oh, look, you know, and he's so amazing. So working with him, it's not really that much of a collaborative process. It kind of gets done through the art designer. They have the spread, the layout of the book, and they suggest where they think some illustrations would work and what type of illustrations would work better. And we've got, you know, just to show you, we've got full page illustrations, like this one, which is my favorite. And then we've got, and then we just got kind of little kind of illustrations which just kind of fit into the narrative, like into the book. And so working with him, it was just amazing. He's just an amazing illustrator. So they kind of like showed me the roughs. I said, oh wow, these are amazing. You know, can we just add a chimney and put Dad's glasses on and be a bit rougher? And that was literally it. But the illustrations, everybody comments on them because I think it's such an unusual cover. It really, really stands out from quite a lot of quite typical middle grade covers on the market. I feel that all have a certain sort of, and this one's very different. When you see it, it's kind of like, wow, this one's really different, and it really tells the story of the book on the cover. I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, I love the cover, and the images throughout I thought were like placed very expertly. Like they were very powerful, captured a lot of emotions of the characters and like quite emotive scenes often. I think I bookmarked one of my favorite illustrations, which if you don't mind if I show.
Oh yes, the roars.
The roar, which I thought, there's just something about it that was very powerful. At one of April and Bear's early meetings, and just kind of complimented the beautiful writing on the side as well. So yeah, I think, Hannah, you're going to read a short snippet from one of April and Bear's encounters, kind of similar. Not the roar one, I don't think.
No,
somewhere a bit earlier.
I really like the roar theme, because there's that theme. We'll talk about this in a minute, but they talk about the theme about finding your voice. So this is what I do, quite a lot of school visits. And the book's gone down really well in the schools, which we'll probably talk about again. But the bit that I normally read from, which just to read from you now, is only a minute long, everybody, don't worry, I'm not going to be reading for hours. The rest of the call will take it up with me reading. It's just a moment when April and Bear first meet. And obviously, when you're kind of trying to look for it, you can never find it. So this is the moment when they first meet. So she's on the island. She thinks that she's seen the polar bear, and she's exploring the island trying to find him. And then she hears this noise. This is the first moment of meeting. It's chapter 6. He stood on his 2 hind legs, rearing up like a brilliant white stallion into the sky, with his chin extended forward confidently. He didn't look in pain. In fact, he stood in a way that indicated he knew just how magnificent he was. The combination of powerful muscle and raw brute strength took April's breath clean away, and she clapped her hands over her mouth to stop herself gasping out loud. "You're incredible," she whispered, and without even knowing why, a tear trickled down her face, not because she was sad, but because it was the only way for the size of the emotion to come out. The way sometimes watching the news about the destruction of the Amazon made her scream in anger, or how some books made her want to break out in a silly song when they got to the mushy part, or even how 1 or 2 pieces of Dad's music stirred and twisted her emotions so much, the only way they could come out was by dancing. The feeling swung from awe to wonder to joy, and then mixed together like a milkshake, so she felt dizzy and lightheaded with them. Tor had been wrong, she thought with a smile, and for a brief moment she wished he were here with her so he could see the bear with his own eyes. I knew I wasn't imagining things, she said at last, finding her voice. I did see you that night. You are real. And Tor is the boy that she meets on the boat on the way to Bear Island, just to put that into context.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Hannah. That was a really lovely passage, and I thought it really captured also April's kind of emotions and growing emotions that come throughout, and that sort of she believes in it, and she believes in this magic of Bear Island. And one of the other things that struck me about this passage and all your writing in general is the setting and the description of the scene of Bear Island, and that's so evocative. Also, the description of the bear is so evocative. So I had a couple of questions there. I know you mentioned Bear Island is real, and I wondered if you went there and if you wanted to talk about that as well, and also if you want to talk about polar bears, if you've seen them, or if just whether in the wild or in the Highland Wildlife Park in Scotland.
No, and also if anyone else has got a question, please do feel free to ask questions as well here while you're here. No, I've never seen a polar bear. I mean, I may have seen a polar bear when I was younger in a zoo, but I'm not really a fan of zoos, I have to say. So I don't tend to go to zoos. But I have got a polar bear jumper on, so there we go. That's my uniform these days, wearing a polar bear.
And you've got the one behind you as well.
The one behind you, I've got one up there as well. They're everywhere in my house. The house has turned into a polar bear den. But I haven't been to Bear Island because it really is a tiny island which is uninhabited, and it's exactly where it is. It's halfway between the mainland of Norway and this archipelago of islands called Svalbard, which is much closer to the North Pole. And I had never heard about it, and it was only when I was chosen to write a book about a polar bear and I was looking at where to research the book that I was literally looking at a map of the world, and that's when I kind of realised, polar bears live up north in the Arctic, not the Antarctic, and that's when I saw this tiny island called Bear Island, and I was like, oh my god, this is like the perfect place to set my book. But it's really difficult to go there. There is a weather station on Bear Island, that much is true. It's manned by a team of about 13 or 14 people, not a father and his daughter, and then half of the island is literally just national marine park, and there's a lot of birds, sort of like a sanctuary, like a wildlife sanctuary for birds, so humans aren't allowed to go to that part. And I think also because there's obviously no man-made harbour, it's very difficult to even land on Bear Island. You have to get there because of the tidals. So I just looked a lot on Google Maps and did my research, but I did go to Tromsø, which is where the journey starts, which is in North Norway, and that was incredible. We did go there because I wanted to see the midnight sun. So the book is set in summer, and so the sun never really sets throughout the book, which just creates this really lovely, that's what the colours are on the cover, the colours of this midnight sun. So we did go there, and that was really surreal because we're walking around at 2:00 in the morning and it's like bright sunshine and sort of bouncing and just feeling so awake. So that was really incredible place, and it does smell really clean and pure, so really lovely.
Yeah, it kind of gives, I mean, what you said there about the midnight sun, and also the description in the book of Bear Island, it gives that edge of the world, like wilderness setting where things are a bit magical and obviously different than what we know here in the UK, which also gives that contrast and with the themes that untouched places affected by climate change, or even more affected by climate change than where we are.
Yeah, because it's one of those last places on Earth which is still untouched. And I think that's what Fiona Noble said in The Bookseller. It's almost like, tumbling through the wardrobe into Narnia and finding this brand new world. But this brand new world is our world. It's just part of the world that we never really go to. But yeah, it is on the front line of climate change as well. Yeah,
exactly. And you spoke about your trip to Norway, and there's another point in the book which, related to the setting for me, and really drew out some interesting themes and made me want to read more. And that was a Norwegian word that you mentioned a couple of times, and I'm going to try and pronounce it correctly. I asked my Norwegian colleague exactly how to say it, but the word was friluftsliv.
That's good.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that's quite right, it was she mentioned it a few times in the book, and when I first saw it, I just thought it was really, really lovely the way you kind of described it. It's that connection to the outdoors, that understanding the environment, which then mirrored April's journey throughout the book. So yeah, I just wondered if you wanted to talk about that theme in particular, that connection, and why you wanted to bring that in.
Yeah, I really wanted to create a central character in a children's book who was perhaps quieter, and whose maybe main quality was kindness and and empathy and her relationship with the outside world, rather than a character who necessarily could wield a sword or a bow and arrow, or, you know, I wanted her main strength to be in her emotional strength rather than a physical strength. So that was the main thing. And also I wanted a character who loved animals and who had a relationship with them, but also did feel this natural affinity with the outside world, which I think what we've discovered during lockdown is much more of the benefits of the outside world and the healing, restorative power of nature on our mental health and just on our psyche. So I really wanted to emphasize that. So that word for me, that word which I'm not saying because I can't say, so yeah, that word for me summed up who she is as a character, and also the exploration on the island, and the way even, like, you know, Bear, the polar bear, teaches her to listen, to smell, to use her sort of senses to really almost become really attuned with her environment. And it's just a quality I think that, you know, we could all maybe aspire to, or choose to become more of, particularly for younger readers, and then that would enhance our appreciation of the natural world, and then maybe our respect for it and wanting to look after it a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something we could all learn from as well, like, you know, here and everywhere. What struck me was the kind of slow burn approach of April's journey and meeting Bear and taking her time to really, as you say, like get into tune with the environment and connect with Bear, and then Bear teaches her how to interact with him. So yeah, I just really loved that word for capturing that theme effectively and kind of showing us that respect for the environment and for climate.
I actually found it. I was on when I was on the flight to Norway. It was in a flight magazine, so that's where I discovered it. So I just thought, that work. I'll take that. And I remember I photographed it on my phone so I could remember it and get the spelling right and things like that. So yeah, that's where some of the ideas come from, just little random things.
Yeah, it's nice coming across that, isn't it? Sometimes random things that inspire your writing.
I've seen a couple of questions. Should we leave the questions to the end, or what do you want to do, Lyndsey?
I think I haven't actually. I can't see the Q&A at the moment. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'll come to them at the end, and then
because they're keep them coming though, because they're lovely writing questions. So I'll answer all the writing questions at the end. But if you get any questions throughout the process of the call, do pop them in the Q&A, and then we'll get to them at the end.
Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely come back to them. So yeah, I mean that kind of takes us nicely into climate fiction in general, which is something we also wanted to talk and delve more into today. Firstly, I know there's a trend in climate fiction to be quite dystopian, especially in adult novels. Not that I'm necessarily complaining. I am a big fan of dystopian novels as well.
Yeah.
But I think what you balanced really well in The Last Bear was there was this real mix. You didn't sugarcoat some of the really important information of climate change. You know, there was facts there about ice caps melting, about sea warming, about plastic washing up on the shore. But there's also not doom. It's not all doom and gloom. There's hopeful and this heartwarming, empowering message throughout. And yeah, I just thought it'd be nice to hear a little bit from you about why you wanted to tell the story in this way and how you got that balance across.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, like, I don't think anyone's, certainly not myself, I didn't set out to write a climate change book. That wasn't my agenda. I just wanted to write a book about everything that I loved most in the world, which was animals, our relationship with them, and the outside world. But it wasn't until I started writing about polar bears that I realised I couldn't write about them without writing about how their habitat and their population numbers are really being affected by climate change. So that's why I kind of write the book. And also, I think, I've done a lot of work in personal development over the years and had some, some involvement with teenagers as well in terms of teaching. And one of the things I really wanted to, which I'm really passionate about, I suppose, is trying to put more positive narratives into the world, all about empowerment and inspiring, because I think if you can leave a child or a young person or an adult with that kind of feeling, it's far more productive than fearing them, making them being afraid. Because I think, we talked about this before, when somebody is afraid, they would retreat into themselves and contract. And then that becomes a form of apathy. Well, what's the point of doing something? Because, it's not going to make a difference anyway. I'm just going to let it, it's going to happen anyway. And so for me, because it's such a big subject and really scary, and I get really frightened by it and I get really upset by it. I can't think about the polar bears or watch David Attenborough documentaries because I literally will cry. I can't watch them because I'm so sensitive. And I know that I'm not the only one. So for me, it was like, what message can I give to children and librarians and teachers and parents who are the caregivers that can inspire a child to feel like, actually, I can make a difference in this narrative. I can do something and I can feel empowered. And it really links in with this library reading for pleasure. And some of the librarians present might be able to correct me, but I think the library pick this summer is about world wildlife heroes. So it's about like, how can you be the hero of your own life? And even if you do one tiny thing, how can you collectively go on to save the planet? So that's why I wanted to come at it from this particular angle, just to sort of bring some hope into the conversation.
Yeah, and yeah, you definitely have done that. And I think with April, it's giving readers someone they can look up to as well, and someone who's kind of in this this small area, and she thinks, what is the one thing I can do to change or to make life better for this one area and one bear. And there's a line in the book which you kind of, I suppose you hinted at in your last comment, there's that I think you said when I spoke to you previously, people have mentioned it before as kind of sticking with them, and it's, imagine if every single person on the planet just did one thing. Yeah. And yeah, that kind of captures that wanting to have something that you can control and also do your part. And it also made me think, oh, sorry.
I was going to say that one thing can be tiny. That can be just switching, switching your water bottle to sort of reusable water bottle. It could be changing your search engine. There can be tiny things. But yeah, imagine if, like, what's the population of the planet? How many million? Imagine if every single person, and obviously some people can make more of a change, but we have to reach that tipping point. And I think if that line sticks, which it does stick, it can be really powerful.
Yeah, and it also made me think of the youth climate strikers, the climate movement that have been rising up over the past couple of years. And I wondered if that came into your writing, if it inspired your writing or influenced how you feel about the genre now. Obviously, that was a big movement a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and
it still is.
It still is. But obviously, the pandemic's made it more difficult, but it is still going on. Mm-hmm. For me, and we talked about this, it's like when I submitted the book, which was... when was it? It was 2019. So I wrote it to the beginning of 2019, and I started submitting to literary agents September, October, and I got my publishing deal January 2020. And I remember I subbed it to my agent as for readers of Michael Morpurgo who want to let out their inner Greta. That's why I subbed it, And she was someone who was really, and I Twitter stalked her, and my agent Claire Wilson, and she was someone that was very ecological. She kind of had been to some of these strikes in London, and I really wanted personally someone that was aligned with the message of the book. So for me, it's never just been about my writing career. And obviously all the accolades and the sales are fantastic, but it has to be, well, what difference is this book making? I don't just want it to be, well, that's nice, on to the next one. I want it to be, what change can we make? So I really wanted Claire to be aligned with the book, and she was. But when she submitted to publishers, I said, you know, do you submit under the thing of it being like a climate change type book? And she was like, this was only a year ago, last January. She was kind of like, well, that's not really a genre yet. We don't lead on that. And I was kind of like really amazed, because like you said, I looked around at the news and I saw all these millions of people in many, many different countries across the world. There's many, you know, Greta gets a lot of publicity, but there's so many climate activists like in Uganda and India, you know, so many places. We see the white image of it, but it really is a worldwide thing. And I just thought, well, there's millions of children out there that are really, really passionate about this. Surely that would translate over into children's fiction. It just was a no-brainer for me. So, yes, I can't remember what the question was actually now, Lyndsey. I've just gone off on a tangent.
No, well, it was kind of how that had influenced how you feel about the book, the climate strike, or the climate strikes. But yeah, I think you answered that.
They're incredible, these children. Yeah. They're incredible what they're doing. There's this girl in India, and I can't remember what her name is, but she's something like 11 years old, and she's really rallying against the government about single-use plastic. She goes on strikes. You know, there's some incredible children out there, and it should be their responsibility. They should not be the ones that are trying to change the world. But so it's, you know, for teachers and librarians who are watching this or watching the replay, it's kind of like, well, yeah, I'm teaching the book, but then how can I model the behaviour that I want my children to actually adopt going forward?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'll always remember that feeling. I went to one of the early climate action marches in Edinburgh and going to Parliament, where the end of the march was, and literally just, I mean, so it's kind of related to the book. I was just hit by this real roar of young people who had gathered, and it was quite emotional and quite overwhelmed by the sheer number who were just saying enough is enough, you have to listen. And yeah, it shouldn't have got to this stage. Yet them doing that really has made a difference to leaders listening up, and gives that space for people to come in and say that. So yeah, I mean, I personally am very inspired by them constantly, and great to get to know and work with some of them through my job. I work at WWF Scotland for the benefits of the audience, so I do work in environmental policy in my day job besides writing. So yeah, that's kind of extra special.
Yeah, rewarding. I bet it was really rewarding for you just to see, and it's frustrating as well, because I think people maybe, you know, the last page isn't just an environmental book, but you know, I'd hate to sort of think, oh, it's an environmental issue book. It is an adventure story, but you know, I think we live in a world where you cannot talk now about, you know, things which are happening without bringing in the environment and the effect that that's having on young children. And some are being really, you know, like you're saying, these activists and this roar of change, and some of them are just really anxious about it, terribly anxious, you know, and that's heartbreaking.
Have you had much engagement with schools or classrooms of Last Bear, going to speak to children who might be involved in these strikes or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the strike is hard at the moment, but I think when you kind of start out as a children's author, my naivety, I didn't really even think about the school involvement, because you're just focusing on the book. And then when you kind of get into the sort of the production line of it, as it were, then you realise that school visits and schools are such a massive part. Oh, I love the mug, hey, on trend.
On polar bear.
On trend. Yeah, so I launched in February the 18th, and then in my kind of, I was quite close to World Book Day week, and so we did quite a lot of multi-school visits, talking about the Last Bear, and they were kind of like my early visits. I did another talk for seven stories, chaired by Jess French, who wrote this one for World Book Day. We're going to talk about some of our books later on, but she wrote this, Protect the Planet. And so, yeah, and a lot of schools are really interested in using the resource. I've got resources on my website, which is www.hannahgold.world, and which the publishers created for schools for Key Stage 2, and also school visits are, where we're talking about The Last Bear, the themes, and we're giving eco tips. And like I said, it really ties into this year's reading for pleasure kind of readings, I think, for the library, the World Wildlife Heroes. And so, it's a really popular school book because many schools are looking at climate change, either on the curriculum or they're looking at endangered animals, and they can bring in this story, which you might want to just use for reading for pleasure, but it still can tie into, your curriculum themes and how to make a difference, etc.
Yeah, great. And it's good to hear how much it's kind of coming into the mainstream in schools as well. I don't think it was such a big thing when I was at school, but certainly we're kind of, I think I was in a minority thinking or wanting to talk about it, but it's definitely growing.
It's a huge thing now, because I've had so many, I think it's so many teachers, and not just, there's many books that we can talk about, which we will mention at the end of this, like books that teachers can use. But it has to be a thing now, doesn't it? Because I think there really should be lessons in how to respect your planet. That would be a behaviour for me. That's a no-brainer lesson, how to treat, you treat other people with respect, but we've got to treat the planet with respect as well. So lessons in that, let's do that.
And then I guess in general, not just in the schools and classrooms, that climate fiction has become this growing trend. And I think in even just the way it's called climate fiction or cli-fi, it seems like that's a relatively recent term. So do you think, is that a growing market for now? Well, do you think it'll keep growing and publishing going forward?
I think so. Even in the book, so we're recording this in beginning of May. God, my dates are just all over the place today, excuse me. And even in the bookseller today, there was an article about children's, what books are selling. And there's a mention in there like Earth Day themes. And then I went to this talk the other night, which was from 3 reviewers in the press, from the bookseller and the Sunday Times and the Guardian, and they talked about the upcoming trends. And again, it was kind of like, obviously inclusivity trends, obviously what we need so much more of, but also sort of nature ones as well as another up and coming one. And if you look at, we're kind of recording this at the beginning of May, and the Waterstones' current children book of the month is Hark Lights by Tim Tilley. And that's very much about taking care of nature and how, one person can make a difference. So it is becoming much more of a theme and a trend. I'm very, very pleased to see.
And
no, I think you're going to mention the League.
Yes, I was just about to ask you about that, because I know, I know you're a member of the Climate Fiction Writers League. So if you want to talk about your involvement with that.
There's an author called Lauren James who's YA, and she set up at the beginning of this year, basically the Climate Fiction Writers League, because she saw this kind of gap in the market, I suppose, of like 2 authors for YA or MG, which is young adult and middle grade, writing about climate fiction, either whether it be dystopian or a bit like mine, or non-fiction even. And so she set up the Climate Fiction League, and now she's got something like 107 members. And so every month there's a newsletter, there's a Facebook page, there's a Twitter handle, there's a website link for it as well. And so that's a really good thing to sort of have a look at, because she does interviews, they recommend books which are coming out, and they're very, very obviously strong advocates for either making climate change the forefront of the book or just maybe a strand running through it.
And I think, the sheer number of it just shows how much it is featuring in works. But looking forward to see how it grows over the years. And definitely as well, echo that, recommend having a look at the blogs, and there's various other things that coming out and interviews with authors as well. Is there anything more you'd want to see in this growing genre? Is there anything that you want to see more of?
I think it'd be really great, tying in the inclusivity angle, because one of the things about climate change in children is, like I said before, we often see like Greta being the face of it. But really, climate change is hitting countries like Africa and that, which are much more of the front line. So it would be good to see climate change books which are kind of more inclusive, which haven't necessarily just got a white hero or heroine. Also would be good to see climate change books, and I heard this on an interview the other night, so I'm kind of basically copying it, I'll be honest, but books which kind of show the change that we want to see. So rather than just painting the picture of, oh, here's what's wrong, what can we do about it, this is what might happen if we don't do something, maybe showing the modeling of the new behavior and the new norm, so then that can normalize actually how we should be living or could be living. That would be really good to see as well, and just more of it.
Yeah, I think it's the positive futures, isn't it? Because I mean, a lot of the stuff I read or have read recently that is climate change, it is kind of, we've made all the wrong choices and it's a little bit too late, and or it kind of goes into a very sci-fi-esque vibe, which again, I have enjoyed those. I don't want to, I'm not being critical of the authors, but it's just there's more of those.
I think even if you're not really, if it's not really your bag, and that's fine, there's lots of kind of things which I'm not a big fan of, but even if like you're writing something completely different, could your character in it be making more ecological choices? You know, like we always talk about having children characters in book who are more respectful. You know, how can we show them in book to be more respectful of the environment, regardless of the genre that you're writing? So anybody reads it kind of thinks, oh yes, you know, this character isn't having a party with a with throwaway kind of like disposable plates and knives and forks and stuff like that. It's, which I've seen in some books, and that's just crazy, you know. So yeah, the choices they can make in a subtle way.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. And like, how do we get climate, because climate change is happening now, and it doesn't feature that strongly as far as I've seen in like contemporary fiction, and I do wonder if that's going to start kind of coming into it, the kind of even just green living or respecting the environment, as you say, like practices coming into
and it not being some kind of not being some kind of joke like, oh, my mum, you know, oh, she's some sort of eco warrior and she's kind of got, she's a bit loopy, or it's kind of like almost treated, if you've got like a parent or a grandparent or a guardian, they're almost like the joke figure. It's kind of like, well, how can they're not joke figures, they're just normal people like me and you who are actually just making more conscious choices. Why can't we show that kind of parent or parent giver who's just a normal person but just makes, you know, smarter choices rather than being somewhat like a little bit wacky? It's let's normalize it, Lyndsey, that's all.
Yes. I think. Just a quick note to the audience. I realise we're going to go into Q&A
I love
soon,
questions.
But I'm just going to give you a chance to have a minute to think about it and pop your questions in the Q&A. And I've got one more question for Hannah from my end for now. It was, do you have any top tips for writers for climate fiction? I know you've probably covered off quite a lot of stuff, but if there's any kind of key things that we might have missed.
I think it's that sense of don't go into it too worthy. You know, like I said, I never set out to write some sort of climate fiction book. It came just out of a love. So I wouldn't approach it from trying to make it the central topic in a way, and try not to be preachy in it either, which is really hard. And some people might say that mine's a bit heavy-handed. I've had that criticism, and some people say it's not heavy-handed at all. It is really hard to get a message in without feeling like you're not in some pulpit delivering a sermon. So try to be subtle with it as well. And Lyndsey, if there's an opportunity, can I just recommend some books as well?
Yeah, of course.
Now a good time. So Melt by Elle Fountain. Is that Fountain? That's just come out. That's a really, really good book set in the Arctic tundra. Really recommend it. I read that one. She's a really talented author. This is last year's. This is Where the World Turns Wild, Nicola Penfold. Really lovely book again to use for schools. Those two would be great in terms of using for schools. And she's got her second book out this summer, set on an oyster farm. Hark Lights, which I've mentioned, which is the current Waterstones Children's Book of the Month. Lovely illustrations about small people making a big difference. This is an Australian author, Bren McDibble. Have you heard of her?
I haven't actually. No,
yeah, she's a friend of mine, but her book, this is called Across the Risen Sea, but her breakout book was How to Be. B-E-E as in bzz, and they're really good. Again, they're dystopian, but they're really good books about living in this kind of like climate change world. This isn't necessarily a climate change book, but I wanted to highlight it. Darwin's Dragons, because if we're going back to the theory of evolution, let's start with that one.
And it's the ecological side, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And again, any books which just can encourage a love of nature or animals, that sort of fits into the bracket as well. Jess French, I mentioned, this is her World Book Day book, and she's got lots of other books, and she's she's such an enthusiastic teacher and full of really accessible tips. And then this one as well, Sita Brahmachari. This is about rescuing a whale, really beautiful, really poetic, and again, this whale's kind of got a lot of plastic in it, so it could teach you about plastic pollution. That's it. Oh, and of course, the last bear.
And the last bear.
Which opportunity just to show you that cover.
Lovely. Yeah.
I know, it's gorgeous, isn't it? And the paperback, just so you know, comes out January next year. Okay,
and I'll also mention just one book.
Go on.
Well, it's the Exodus trilogy by Julie Britannia, who that's a kind of dystopian future Scotland post climate change. It's from a wee while ago, but I've been getting some mentoring from her for the past year, so it's been brilliant to have read her books and then get that. So definitely check those out. We've got your
book on the horizon as well.
Well, it's in editing mode at the moment, so we'll
But one day, look out for the space, everybody. Lyndsey Croal's book coming out to a bookshop near you soon.
Fingers crossed. Yeah,
definitely.
Great. Okay, so I've got a few questions in, so that's great. We've got one from Stuart Cook, it's from Year 6 Francis Olive Anderson Primary School. So the question is, what inspired you to write The Last Bear?
I think I kind of touched upon this a little bit, but it is really interesting because where do stories come from? And I think everybody, it relates. Some people, it just comes from something they've read in the newspaper or a snippet of conversation. For me, it was very much a decision I made when I had been going through quite a low patch in my life, and I was kind of like, I'd stopped writing, and I'd written a couple of young adult books previously which hadn't really got anywhere, and I'd had lots of been through the rejection path and wondered whether it was ever going to happen to me. And so then I think I'd always wanted to write a children's book. So it was my favourite, but I'd always been putting it off until I was ready. And then I kind of reached this low point in my life, and I thought, well, I'm never going to be ready. There's never a utopian thing where you think you're ready for something. And I realized that what was stopping me was just fear, fear of failure, fear of not being able to do it. Like when you go for a dream, you're confronted with the reality of the dream potentially not coming true. So it's easier sometimes to hold the dream at arm's length. So I decided to go for it. And because I'd been going through this really bad patch in my life, that's why the book is quite raw. So the book was very much like, I think when I'd written YA previously, I was trying to look at market trends. Oh, this looks popular. I'm going to try to write like this. And when I wrote The Last Bear, like we talked about, there weren't really that many books like this on the market. At the time, what was selling, what will always sell, is fantasy. And funny was a really big thing. And I remember thinking, but I can't really write fantasy, and I'm not particularly funny on the page. But it was a real thing of, I'm just going to channel all this emotion into the kind of things that I love most, which is animals and relationships and emotions. And I'm going to put everything of myself into this book and onto the page. And along the way, I'm going to realize that I'm also enough, that what I'm writing is enough, and that who I am is enough, because I don't need to be like somebody else. I'm just going to be 100% me. So whereas April also finds her voice, I think in the writing of it, I also found my voice too.
Oh, that's really lovely. Yeah. And you definitely, I certainly had a very emotional reaction after reading it. I had a wee bit of a tear in my eye for it being such a lovely story. So yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah, it does make, that's one of the things that my publisher really liked when I had my meeting with them, but it was just January last year. And I went to the meeting and I was really nervous and kind of like, oh, you know, this is really big, and it's HarperCollins, this is really big, and I feel tiny. But like April next to the bear, the building was huge, the stature, the reputation was huge, and I just felt like little old me. And I went to the meeting, and they said it had made them cry, which is one of the reasons that they wanted to buy it. They said, you know, when a book comes in and makes you cry, they know it's a special book.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why they signed it, you know, because it's got that emotion in it. But that emotion almost came from that really horrible place in my life that I was in, which I was able to kind of put into the book. So really, I always say what became my worst point in my life became my greatest breakthrough, you know. So yeah, some things happen for a reason.
Yeah. And great to have something come up with it like this as well.
Yeah.
This journey.
It's a beautiful product.
Yeah. We've got another question from Lyndsey Rogers. How did you find balancing issues with character plot development during the writing process?
That's a really good thing, because I think, you know, I was really conscious of, like, I don't want to be too didactic, I don't want to be preachy, and the hardest thing for me was getting in the reality and the research of the island and the polar bears into a narrative book. But honestly, I didn't even research, just a confession, I didn't research polar bears before I started, because I didn't want, you know, to say, well, his paw is 15 centimeters across when he lands, and, and then his fur isn't really kind of, I've got all the facts now, but when I wrote it, I really wanted Bear to be really real. And one of my readers the other day said, well, Bear's kind of like a human in a bear costume, and that's exactly what he is. He's real. So I didn't want to put too much fact on it. But I think that kind of thing comes in the editing process. Both Lyndsey's, to answer the question, you put the information in, and if you feel it's a bit too much, you can always take it out in the edits. But I always knew I wanted the story first, and then, you know, the sort of, I suppose, the climate fiction angle to be an undercurrent going through it, which drives the story. Yeah.
Great, thanks. The next two questions are kind of similar, and it's about what your next book will be about, or what are you working on at the moment? What projects do you have?
Yeah, well, there's a clue behind me. If we look behind the polar bear, we can see the tail of a whale surfacing through the water. Yeah, so the next book is kind of like very similar in a way. It's about a big animal, and it's a grey whale, and it's set off the coast of California, which is where the grey whales migrate. So the grey whale migrates from the Arctic waters where it feeds, and then it migrates all the way down to like these estuaries, these lagoons in Mexico, where it breeds and has its calves, and then it kind of go back all the way back. So it's kind of like about that, but it's about a whale that goes missing. And so these two children in this one, they go off on a hunt to find the missing whale. So it's kind of like, it's got the themes of animal children relationships, but it's very much set on the ocean as well, and all the beauty and the power and the majesty of the ocean.
Oh, brilliant.
And that comes out, just so you know, that comes out the end of March 2022.
Oh, so not too far away then. So that's next year, because your paperback, when does your paperback come out again?
The paperback of The Last Bear comes out beginning of January 2021, and then the hardback of the new book, as yet untitled, but probably have a whale in the title, that comes out end of March 2022. Yeah, at the moment. Sometimes the publishing schedule changes, so you know, you never know. It's changed already twice, so it might change again.
Yeah. I'm just seeing if there's any other questions. I don't think there's any questions, but I've got a couple that I can.
Yeah, if anybody has any quick questions they want to ask, please do ask now.
Yeah, please do pop them in. I had one which was about Michael Marpargo, and how did it feel to get that quote on the front of the book? And also would love to hear how that came about. And it must have been a bit of a dream if you pitched it. I didn't realize you pitched it as a Michael Marpargo. Like, he really is my hero, I'll be honest with you. And then when I was looking at kind of like, you know, what books are on the market, like I said, there was a lot of fantasy and a lot of funny at that time. But I kind of realized that my book really fitted into the same market as for
Michael Morpurgo. So when I pitched it, it was like, oh, for readers of Michael Morpurgo. And obviously, well, not obviously, HarperCollins also look after, they publish Michael Morpurgo. So there comes a point when you've kind of got your finished book in the process, and then the publisher turns around to you and says, is there anybody that you would like for us to try to get an endorsement for it? And I wrote out this really like a long shopping list, literally, and at the top I put Michael Morpurgo, capital letters. If you can get him, that would be the dream. Because I've always thought, and this comes up to a question now, do you have any advice for budding authors? My advice would be always aim higher than what you think that you can get. You know, old me like would have said, well, I can't say Michael Morpurgo because there's no way he will say yes, so I'm going to go for someone I think I can get. But the whole way through with this book, I always said to myself, I'm going to aim as high as I can possibly get, because if I don't try, I'll never know. And so that's when I went for the top agent, and I got the top agent, and when we kind of got the top publisher, and it really recalibrated my idea of what was possible for myself. I thought, oh, you know, I can do this. And so basically they went away and they squirreled about in the background, and it went really quiet, and about 3 months later I got an email on a Friday afternoon, and it said Michael Morpurgo, and it was like, you know, look who's, and it had the quote, and it said something like, you know, he's read it and he loved it, and why wouldn't he love it? And it was like, this is unforgettable, deeply moving, an important first novel. And they were so pleased, and I was so pleased, and it was just been amazing to have his cover on the book, and so generous as well, because it really does sell the book.
Yeah. Well, I thought the pitch and the illustrations and everything sold it as well. But yeah, that's extra special, isn't it? I think, you know,
in Kid Lit, you don't get a lot of newspaper space. We hardly get any newspaper space. We get something like 3% of the space compared to adult fiction. So obviously a cover does wonders. If you kind of get like a big name on your cover as well, it helps you get into the bookshops. It helps booksellers take notice. And then for people picking up the book and they recognise Michael Morpurgo's name and not mine at the moment, it's one of those little things that tips it over the edge into becoming more of a success.
That's really interesting from that marketing perspective, I guess. There's another question in the chat, which is, do you find it quite easy to come up with ideas? From Molly.
Yeah, no, Molly, not really. I'm not one of those authors that's always buzzing with ideas, you know. It's like, I think I try to sort of have like one idea at a time, and so often when I'm writing the first draft, when I wrote the first draft of The Last Bear, I came up with the idea of book 2 as I was writing it, because I think creativity begets creativity. And as I was writing the draft of this book, the whale book, I came up with the idea of book 3, you know, and a couple of other little ideas. But I'm not totally buzzing with ideas. I tend to kind of have one idea that locks in, and I spend a lot of time world building, character building, really trying to get the environment right. And then from that, the story just kind of grows in my mind. But I do have a little notebook that I write ideas down on the rare occasions I get them, Molly.
Do you, or even before you were writing Last Bear, were you members of any kind of writing groups, or involved with critique groups? I know I certainly love doing that sort of thing. So I really recommend that.
And there's you know, Screeby, that I pronounce it, that's a really good one. But also Write Mentor is a really great one to belong to. They do like a free newsletter, and they have like scholarships and really low cost courses. But no, actually I wasn't. I did a screenwriting degree at university, and then along the years I've often preferred to do one-to-one work rather than coursework. And so with my previous YA book, I submitted it to an agent, I think it was called Beat the Rejection Clinic or something, and they gave me feedback on the synopsis and the opening chapters. And then with this book, I had it kind of critiqued / edited by a fellow author who was already established, and she gave me some feedback. But I had quite a lot of author friends, but nothing as strong as a community as I'd probably recommend other people to have. But I definitely believe in creating those author relationships, and definitely getting feedback on your work before you submit it to agents, for sure.
Oh yeah, that's I mean, that's something I didn't do when I was first starting out writing, and it's definitely something I would say to people as well. Like, I mean, personally, I've found critique groups to be it's how you work, isn't it? Everyone's quite it's quite personal, but I found critique groups as both supportive when going through the querying and then the being on submission type journey, which can be quite stressful, as I'm sure you're well aware of as well. So
it's just good to share it with. And then going back to the question of, do you have any budding advice, my final bit would just be like, it is about the mental game. So yes, learn the craft and get the critiques, and treat it as you would any job in terms of constantly trying to raise your game, so it's kind of as good as it can be. But the next part is to be really authentic to you, like don't necessarily try to follow the trends. Write something which is really true to you, and kind of believe that what you're writing is enough and it has got value to the world. I think half of our life as human beings is constantly questioning whether we're enough, whether we're good enough. And I think when you write a book, it's about saying, I'm owning this, it is good enough, I've done all the kind of the crafty bits, I've got the feedback, and I've just got to own it. And the second part is, like I said, just shoot higher than what you think you're capable of, because unless you do that, you don't know what you can, where you can go with it. And if you'd said to me 2 years ago that I'd be sitting here just even doing this festival or talking about my book, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But I had to go through a lot of internal sort of rewiring to believe that actually this could happen to somebody like me.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. We've probably got a few minutes if we've got one more question from anyone, but otherwise I might just jump into a couple of just quick fire ones.
The quick fire questions. I like the quick fire.
Just double checking the Q&A, there isn't anything we've missed. So first, what are you currently reading?
I'm currently reading a proof of a book called Fireborn, which is out this October by a fellow HarperCollins author called Aisling Fowler. Fantasy. It's not really I don't really read a lot of fantasy, but it's fantasy, and it's epic and it's wonderful. So I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Besides the polar bear, do you have a favorite animal?
Pangolin.
Oh, why? Is it just
kind of cool, scaly and wonderful? I've just seen, can we finish at 12:58? That was my quick answer.
All right, okay, great.
Yeah, the pangolin, because they're endangered and they're trafficked and they need our help, and because I like kind of things which are a bit different. So one more question, maybe.
One more question is, when's your next event? For people who might want to tune into another
next Tuesday with Tiny Talks, and it's a teacher, parent, librarian event talking about, again, environmental books, with Vashti Hardy as well on that one.
Brilliant, thanks. Thanks everyone. Thanks to the audience for excellent questions, and to Stay at Home Fest for giving space for an event like this. And Hannah, of course, for this really interesting discussion. It's been great. And if you haven't already, get yourself a copy of The Last Bear for yourself, for friends, family, or the eco heart in your life.
Yes.
Finish up bang on 12:58. And
just to say, thank you for joining me. It's been such a pleasure, and to know book is at the library as well, or in bookshops, and support your local and school. If you want to do a school visit, just give me a shout on my website, www.hannahgold.world. So thank you so much. Thank you, Lyndsey.
Thank you. Hope you all have a lovely rest of Friday, and make sure